I am Felipe Tran, an emergency physician from the Division of Emergency Ultrasound and Center for Resuscitation Science at University of Pennsylvania. This is the second of two webinars on the implementation of transesophageal echocardiography, or TEE, in the emergency department. If you haven't seen part 1, I advise you to watch that webinar first. If you have already, welcome back. This presentation has been prepared by me and represents my own perspectives and experiences on this topic. It does not represent a comprehensive training for the practice of transesophageal echocardiography. Providers should not perform these bedside ultrasound examinations and procedures solely in reliance upon the information in this presentation. During this webinar, we will cover what are the main training options to gain the necessary skills to perform TEE. We will then discuss credentialing and institutional privileges for the practice of point-of-care TEE, and then we will finally review some of the main resources available for learning and training in TEE. Competency in resuscitative TEE requires the development of two different types of skills: cognitive skills for image interpretation, identification of normal anatomy and pathology, and second, motor skills for image acquisition. Unlike cardiac anesthesia or cardiology, for us and the emergency department, the frequency of studies is relatively low. Therefore, access to simulation, I believe, is critical not just for skill acquisition, but also for maintenance of competency. There are currently at least 3 comparable simulation systems marketed in the United States, all 3 using virtual reality with digital reconstruction to generate TEE images. They all offer packages with clinical cases and online versions of their software. The first of these companies is HeartWorks, developed by a British company in 2008. It's the oldest still existing system, and it is sold by Metaphor in the United States. It is a virtual reality software. Images were created by computer digital reconstruction from an anatomically correct heart. Same system allows both TTE and TEE, has several packages of clinical scenarios, and it's a very well developed software. Feels and looks extremely real both in the views and transition between views. The Vimedic system was developed by CAE Healthcare from Canada in 2009. It was developed similarly than HeartWorks by digital reconstruction. It has also packages of clinical scenarios. One of the main advantages is the same system also allows both transthoracic and TEE, as well as abdominal and OB/GYN modules. It recently released a VR system that has been marketed as one of the main advantages of this simulation system. The US Mentor system is the newest system in the market and belongs to a large line of simulation systems covering pretty much any specialty involving procedures. Symbionics is an Israeli company which was acquired by 3D Systems in 2014. It's a fairly new product, but the company behind is a massive maker of simulation equipment. It is also virtual reality, computer-based digital reconstruction, also has packages of clinical scenarios, and similarly to the previous simulation systems, they are also coming out with a VR system, and they have a very slick software as well. Lastly, the newest simulation system is actually not yet being marketed in the United States. Medical Simulation Technologies is a startup company from Poland, funded in 2016. Is a much more rudimentary system compared to the others, but seems like it could be a solid low-budget option. It's a unique product in that their software is based on a 3D dataset obtained from CAT scans, so it looks like CT images. Pretty real, but not quite the same look of ultrasound images. In my opinion, in addition to simulation, the operating room is the ideal training environment for emergency physicians to train, to learn, and to gain experience on TEE. This is for multiple reasons. It is an ideal controlled environment to learn. It's perfect positioning and monitoring. There's direct supervision of an experienced anesthesiologist. You can practice probe insertion, the only motor skill you can't get from simulation. You can spend hours scanning the same patient. CT surgeries last 4, 6, or 8 hours, and the probe stays in for most of the case. You can see pathology. I would have my mentor text me when he was on call in the operating room to come scrub in during cases where there was pathology to see that was relevant to my practice, such as aortic dissections being repaired, valvular pathologies, massive pulmonary embolisms going for thrombectomy, for instance, left ventricular assist devices, related complications, ECMO cannulations, placements of impellas, so on and so forth. I cannot recommend enough spending time in the operating room to gain the motor skills and more experience in the practice of TE. So let's talk about credentialing and privileges for the practice of focus at TE. I know many of you have questions around this issue, and I certainly don't have all the answers. But what I can tell you is that from my experience in 2 academic institutions is that this is still a gray area, and we have just to deal with it. There is no magic recipe, unfortunately. It will depend on the institution-specific politics, but we can learn from the process that others have gone through, and hopefully that will make initiation of your program easier. Like always in politics, I think it's important to send the right guy to the table, someone with experience. This might not be the same TE champion in your division, maybe the director or the chair in your institution. Identify a friend, an ally in either cardiac anesthesia or cardiology, someone who believes in the value of bringing this tool to the emergency department, a believer that can help you advocate from outside the Department of Emergency Medicine. Now, on a more practical point, the key, I think, is to focus on the point that we're not performing comprehensive diagnostic, consultative TE. Those applications are regulated by the American College of Cardiology, the American Society of Echocardiography, and there's well-defined competency standards, but not for point-of-care focus TE. Nobody really owns point-of-care TE. There's no interdisciplinary guidelines to regulate the practice of point-of-care TE. So the ideal scenario is the development of hospital-wide point-of-care ultrasound guidelines, where TE is simply incorporated. This is the example of how one institution organized this through a multidisciplinary committee. All these specialties came together to regulate the practice of point-of-care ultrasound in the institution, defining what point-of-care ultrasound is, what is emergency use, which are the eligible specialties to practice each type of point-of-care ultrasound, and what are the requirements for each one of these applications. For example, in this case, TE was introduced with 2 levels of privileges, basic and advanced. Again, this is just the example of one institution. So eligible specialties are medicine, ICU, cardiology, emergency medicine, surgery, and anesthesia. Makes sense, right? What is the scope for basic TE in this case? Same scope as defined for basic transthoracic echocardiography. Assessment of LV function, search of effusion or tamponade, use in cardiac arrest. What are the requirements? In this case, 25 supervised scans in a chair-approved curriculum for the department. This is, again, just one institution's defined standards of competency for point-of-care ultrasound. What if your institution does not have point-of-care ultrasound guidelines yet? I don't think that means that you cannot start performing point-of-care TE, but definitely I think this is something that would be worth pursuing as an ideal situation where the practice of point-of-care ultrasound more broadly, not just TE, is regulated across the hospital and across specialties. Finally, I want to mention some of the learning resources that you should be aware of. First is the PI, the Perioperative Interactive Education, a project from the Toronto General Hospital Department of Anesthesia, an amazing free resource that I'm certain each one of the departments that have started to perform transesophageal echo in the United States in emergency medicine has used this resource to train. An outstanding collection of TE images with interactive modules that includes normal anatomy as well as a wide range of pathology. This software, this online platform, is completely free and open access. HeartWorks has a paid e-learning platform, which is essentially an online version of their software. This one is endorsed by the American Society of Echocardiography, and CME is available upon course completion. CAE has a similar product, also requires a license, and it provides CME as well. If you're getting either the HeartWorks or Vimedic simulators, you can probably get a few licenses for the respective e-learning platforms. Both of the software's online resources, the HeartWorks and Vimedic's CAE Healthcare, have free trials that allow you to trial these products before you purchase license. And if you're like me and like actual textbooks, this is a new textbook that just came out and I've been using a lot. I absolutely recommend it. Basic Transesophageal and Critical Care Ultrasound is an outstanding textbook edited by André Denault and group of Canadians. Despite the name, this textbook has nothing basic. I believe there's plenty of pearls and advice and tips from this group of experts, an incredible collection of images. I could not recommend more. I have no ties, no commercial connection with this group. I'm just endorsing this book because I've been using it myself and I find it an absolutely outstanding resource. And that concludes the second webinar on the implementation of transesophageal echocardiography in the emergency department. Please feel free to connect with me on Twitter at fturanmd. If you need to reach me, my direct email is felipeturan@gmail.com, or you can find me on resuscitativt.com. Thank you.